Stop the world!
Welcome to Stop the World. I'm Olivia Nelson.
And I'm David Wroe.
Papua New Guinea's Defence Minister, Dr. Billy Joseph, was one of the standout newsmakers of ASPI's recent Defence Conference in Canberra, with his substantial speech about Pacific security and the Australia-PNG relationship.
So we grabbed him afterwards for a quick podcast conversation. Dr. Joseph is a strong voice for the continued growth in the relationship 50 years on from PNG's independence. He talks about the theme of the conference, preparedness and resilience, and how it applies to PNG, especially with respect to its economy and those of its Pacific neighbours. He talks about the value of strategic partnerships and a PNG-Australia Defence Treaty as a natural progression in the relationship.
He also shares his reflections on the recent Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore, Russia's war against Ukraine, and the risks of conflict in the Indo-Pacific. It's a short episode, but we certainly appreciated Dr. Joseph's visit and the time he spent here with ASPI. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Stop the World, everyone. I'm David Wroe, and I am here with Papua New Guinea's Defence Minister, Dr. Billy Joseph. Minister, thanks for coming on the program. So, you're here for ASPI's 2025 Defence Conference. Thanks for coming to Canberra. The topic of the conference is, of course, preparedness and resilience. So why don't we start with that? Just talk a bit about what preparedness and resilience means for the Papua New Guinean defence and security, now obviously beyond the military to all sorts of other threats and risks that PNG faces.
Thank you, David. Papua New Guinea is part of the Pacific Islands Forum, Millennium and Spirit Group, and very close to Australia. We do understand our space in the highly contested Indo-Pacific region. And so in that context, preparedness and resilience comes into play, in which it is not straightforward a security question. It is a question that has other underlying and underpinning issues with economy, like you said, with disaster and internal policy in each of those countries, and then the national security issues. So as a country, and one of the most important matter or issue that needs to be considered is the economy. Mm-hmm. Economies of Pacific Island countries are fragile and very vulnerable to external shocks. And so when we talk about preparedness, first of all, I think we need to look at the economies of these countries. And economic resilience equals national security and regional security resilience. And how can countries like Papua New Guinea prepare for like a major conflict in the Indo-Pacific? All we can do, like what we have done in Papua New Guinea, is to build strategic partnerships. Because in terms of investing in defense or investing in resilient infrastructures, which is something that we do ourselves, but we can only achieve more when we build that strategic relationships. And for Papua New Guinea, we have I can happily say that we have built that strategic relationship with the US. We have signed defense cooperation agreement with them. And we have existing partnership and agreement with Australia, New Zealand and Japan and others that we have, we call them the close Pacific partners. Mm. And so now we're working on the defense treaty with Australia, and that's been approved by both cabinet. And thus are, in my opinion, what we have done to build that strategic partnership as part of our defense and preparedness for whatever comes, whether that be natural disasters or any conflict in the region, is to tell everyone and build partnerships so that they know where we stand.
Mm-hmm. I mean, economics, obviously, as you point out, economic resilience, hugely important. I mean, it's interesting to me that that Australia-PNG relationship is both a strategic partnership and an economic partnership as well. So it does have that other dimension. How is that going? How is that progressing the economic side, do you think? Is it delivering the sorts of benefits that you hoped it would deliver? And I suppose, a defence treaty is the next logical step for the two countries. I mean, how do you feel that's progressing?
That's a very important question, because you see the 50 years of relationship that we've had with Australia, and our closeness and our shared values has progressed to where we are now. And now we're talking about an 18th NRL team, for an example. Or we're talking about direct funding. Before, it's never happened. It's in the last maybe 5 or 6 years that Australia has directly funded a budget in our country. And that has given us, expanded our economy from a 70 billion kina economy to almost up to 110 billion kina economy. So that is having a direct impact in our economy. So, and then that now sort of builds towards the defense to defense relationship. In our 50 years of anniversary, we have now started a conversation on that treaty, and that treaty is to basically underpin all the different levels of relationship we have had. It's a natural progression from 1975, and even going back as far as the Second World War, when Papua New Guineans fought with Australia in the ditches in Papua New Guinea to defend Australia. Papua New Guinea at that time was part of Australia. Yeah. So now that we have become a sovereign state in 1975 until now, that's going to be 50 years. So we also have looked within ourselves and defined what is the relationship in our 50 years that we've had with all other countries, and how can we integrate and improve the relationship with Australia, whether that be in economy, government to government, people to people, but more so in terms of the challenging security environment that we live in, security and defense to defense relationship. Yes.
Okay. So in that, in the broader security relationship, how important have regional security initiatives like the Pacific Policing Initiative and the Pacific Response Group, how important have those been for PNG preparedness?
Out of the 16 Pacific Island countries, there's only 3, excluding Australia and New Zealand, that have defense forces. Tonga, Fiji, and Papua New Guinea. The others are all policing states. So the Pacific policing strategy is very important because now it is inclusive of all the Pacific Island countries. The South Pacific Defense Ministers meeting also only comprises of defense states. That's the 5, including Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Tonga, Chile, France, because of the overseas territories in the Pacific. So that kind of relationship at different levels, with it is more encompassing. It involves everybody in the Pacific region. And that, like Australia used to say, we want to be the partner of choice. And so they're not just talking, they're actually going down, dealing with those people. Most of those countries in the Pacific have internal security matters. And that also has an economic impact because dealing with internal security matters costs money. And so for Australia to come and help us build resilience, infrastructure, and start strategy to deal with those security matters, both internally and externally, it goes a long way for all those Pacific Island countries to see that Australia is genuine in what they're doing in the Pacific.
Okay. Zooming out for a moment, you've just come from the Shangri-La Dialogue, major regional security and defence gathering. What were your key takeaways from Shangri-La? I mean, Pete Hegseth from the US gave a significant speech. I mean, very strong on China, obviously, but also very strong on US commitment to the Indo-Pacific region. I think, commitment to partners and allies, which I think was probably welcomed by many. I believe China's representation was considerably downgraded on previous years. I mean, plenty of other things going on, lots of other countries involved. What were the sort of key takeaways for you?
Well, firstly, it was my first time to attend Shangri-La Dialogue. But the important takeaways that I have observed, and I've also been informed, is that it was for the first time the highest contingent from European countries that have attended the Shangri-La Dialogue. And because mostly I think they were interested to hear what the US position was. And there's been a lot of talks as to what the new Trump administration foreign policy was. And so their conversation and their position in most of the statements they have made, the take-home message was that what's happening in Europe is not an isolated incident. In fact, they clearly stated that there is boots on the ground from North Korea in Russia fighting in the European conflict. There are weapons being used and support being given from the Indo-Pacific region to the European conflict. And the players in the Indo-Pacific region are closely observing what's happening in the Russia-Ukraine war and what the outcome, even if there is a negotiation, then how that negotiation is going to shape and what would be the outcome. Because the same playbook in the European theater can also be copy-pasted and implemented in the Indo-Pacific theater. So that was basically what the Europeans were saying. And so from the American side, it was a very strong statement from Secretary Hexet. And his statement was, I think, has many components. And the first one was to the American people that the administration will do everything they can to protect the homeland. Yep. And the second statement was for Europe to increase the defense spending and look after themselves so that America will then focus in the Indo-Pacific. So their reassurance to the Indo-Pacific was that when they say that America first does not mean America alone. And that was an important statement because that means that they want to work with all the partners in the Indo-Pacific especially. And they mentioned Australia a couple of times and other countries in the Indo-Pacific region who are close allies of the US. And so that's a good thing. And so peace through strength, position of strength. That is the message that they've sent in the Indo-Pacific. They did also say that in his speech, they did not seek any conflict with China. And they said they respected the strong history and tradition of the Chinese people. And they did not see a regime change or want a regime change in the political structure of China. I think those were important messaging to the politicians or the government of China, but also the Chinese people. And therein lies the hope that there is hope for peace in the Indo-Pacific region, which is what everybody wants and everybody needs. We don't want any conflict in the Indo-Pacific region. But it is concerning for small countries like Papua New Guinea. When you see and look at the history books, the war started in Europe in 1939. And then the aggressors came also out of the Indo-Pacific region in Japan. And when they started invading the neighbours and then they bombed the Pearl Harbor in 1941, the United States joined the war and there was a full-fledged Second World War. And that war ended up in my country because they were on their way to Australia and they had to come through Papua New Guinea because of a strategic geological location, geographic location. And so we can see that maybe the whole rule book of that time is playing out now, and small countries like ours are very concerned. All we want is for there to be peace in the region, peace in the world. But if conflict does come, it is up to every sovereign countries like ours and with our partners to get ready. We do not seek conflict, but if it comes, then we have to be ready.
Mm-hmm. So obviously very important resonances for a country like PNG. You mentioned in the conference during your remarks in there, you used, I think, what is an Indian analogy originally, that when elephants fight, the grass gets trampled. We want to make sure that that we're not all trampled beneath fighting elephants, referring to two large strategic powers. What do you see as a role for other countries? And we'll finish up after this. It's a good one to finish on. But obviously, PNG and Australia have a very strong bilateral relationship. What do you see as a useful role, perhaps even stemming from existing relationships like PNG Australia, for countries like Japan or India, or others from the region, for greater involvement to perhaps just provide some additional kind of strategic stability to Oceania?
Well, we need to keep talking, and dialogue is the only way. Where we come from, when we have issues, we sit down and we talk. And it was disappointing for the Chinese side not to be present at the Shangri-La dialogue. But many different forums exist for those dialogue to happen. So countries like, for example, India, Japan, and other countries in the Pacific, especially the ASEAN countries, need to be a voice for peace and for dialogue and diplomacy. Because use of force should be the last resort by anyone. And we are observing the whole rule book of after the Second World War. the international rules-based order was set to prevent another conflict. And what is concerning right now is that those rules are now being rewritten. Countries like Germany and Japan now can spend unlimited funds on defense and security. That has been prohibited in the past. So when those rule books are being rewritten, it is up to everybody to talk and have dialogue. Bring countries like US and Russia and Ukraine and China and North Korea. Now there needs to be more dialogue. And when we are talking, people have to listen. There is no point in just talking. Like small countries like ours, we can only talk through our regional architecture, like Pacific Islands Forum or South Pacific Defense Ministers Meeting, Shangri-La Dialogue. So when we talk, at least people must listen. That we may be small, but we are human beings. We also represent sovereign states, and we do have a voice.
Yep.
And whatever they do will also affect us too.
Yep, absolutely. All countries have a voice, and might does not equal right. Minister Joseph, thank you so much for your time.
Really appreciate it.
Cheers.